Huda, thank you so much for coming on Turn Left.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
What's your reaction to the Filton 4 being sentenced to a total of 26 years with it being ruled as acts of terrorism?
It's just completely unjust. It's morally wrong. It's legally wrong. And of course, the key thing is that they were never able to defend themselves against the real accusation against them, which was terrorism. They were not even allowed to defend themselves against the criminal damage charge, which led to the terrorism sentencing because they were gagged. They weren't allowed to talk about their motivations. They weren't allowed to talk about Albert's crimes. They weren't allowed to rely on defences enshrined in British law, such as acting to save lives in Gaza. They were completely gagged, but at the same time, the judge used their motivations, which they weren't even allowed to talk about in trial, as a reason to sentence them as terrorists. I think it's important to understand as well that before the Filton action happened, and we know this because of the prescription case, 2 months before, there was a meeting which followed lots of meetings between Israeli government ministers, British ministers, police, CPS, etc. And in this meeting, they discussed prescribing Palestine action. Police and prosecutors discussed prescribing Palestine action before anyone had ever been arrested for under the Terrorism Act for taking direct action. And so, in order to prescribe us, they had to say we were concerned with terrorism. And in order to do that, they had to start accusing people of terrorism offences for taking direct action. But then, in order to get it over the line, they had to completely stitch up the trial where you were not able to defend yourself against the terrorism accusation against you. And you're completely gagged at trial and then sentenced as a terrorist at the end.
So we've had that, and now we've had recent news of the courts backing the government with their prescription of Palestine Action as a terrorist group. So I would like to get your response to that.
Yeah, I mean it's clearly disappointing, and it's a dark day in terms of our rights in Britain, in terms of our civil liberties. But at the same time, no struggle is simple. The state have literally thrown everything at Palestine Action in order to protect the Israeli weapons industry, in order to protect the Zionist regime. And I think this whole process has just exposed how far they're willing to go in order to protect the Israeli weapons industry. And that is only leading to more and more people from the public being outraged at how they're prioritizing Albert systems over the rights and freedoms of its own citizens. So I believe that the resistance against this is only going to grow on the back of it. And once again, just like the prescription in the first place massively backfires on the government, this decision will also backfire. And we're going to fight this the whole way, to the Supreme Court, and we're willing to take it to the European Court of Human Rights if needs be.
There's an interesting stat I read. So the average terror suspect arrested in England and Wales is now a white woman in her 50s because due to the Palestine Action ban, there's been 2,800 arrests for supporting the group. But of course, that includes those just holding placards. And we've seen the footage of elderly men and elderly women being arrested. But just hearing that stat, majority of terrorists or terror suspects are elderly women.
I think what they've done is they've just massively undermined their own counter-terrorism regime. The word terrorist has completely lost its meaning. And we know it's been used against oppressed groups and Palestinians for decades. But they've taken it so far to the point where now being a terrorist, the label terrorist, means basically nothing in the eyes of the general public. They've undermined the counter-terrorism regime completely, and that's a very dangerous thing for them to do. And also the amount of resources that are being used in order to arrest people for holding signs, in order to, we've had several people now detained at the airport under Schedule 7 powers. We've had counter-terrorism police try and make a local cafe owner in Manchester an informer into Palestine Action. They are pulling everything into this, into what? Into trying to target people who are effectively opposing a genocide, who are effectively destroying Israeli drones and disrupting the likes of Albert systems, which make weapons to massacre people in Palestine, to commit genocide, while simultaneously people who go from Britain to serve in the Israeli military and literally commit war crimes in Gaza. They're not even investigating them. So the hypocrisy has become extremely clear for everyone to see. And I believe that Britain relied on appearing to be fair, appearing to respect human rights. They've thrown that out of the window at this point. And I believe once you get to that point, when you've gone that far for the Israeli weapons industry, you are really at a point of desperation, and it's close to breaking that relationship.
So is going to the European courts, is that the last thing you can do to try and take this further, or is there other things you can do to fight back against this ruling?
What I'd say is the legal way is one way. The political route is really how we're going to win this, because this is a completely politicized case. So just in terms of the legal route, just to be clear, the next step is to go to the Supreme Court. So we'll put in an appeal immediately and we're on an expedited process, which means it's quicker in legal terms, which is not very quick to the normal people. But, hopefully in the next few months, we'll be in the Supreme Court. And if that doesn't work, or if that doesn't work, then we would appeal to the European Court of Human Rights. I do believe we have a solid case. So it's my opinion, and it's the opinion of my lawyers and several legal experts, that in the European Court of Human Rights, it's extremely, extremely likely that we would win. We are just right on the law. This is just disproportionate to human rights and free speech. The issue we're up against is the politicized nature of this whole thing from the very beginning. And to be clear, it's targeting solidarity with Palestine. And it's the Palestine exception. This hasn't happened before to direct action groups, but it just highlights how closely allied Britain is, and also the judiciary is, with the Zionist regime, and also with Elbit systems. But the ruling today, the judgment, it was like a press release written by the Home Secretary. It reminded me of the statement she made when they first tried to prescribe Palestine action. It was completely politicized. It was designed to try and smear us as much as possible in the public. And at the same time, what's crazy about this as well, I mean, there's a lot of crazy things about this. The second trial of the Filton 25 is starting today at the Old Bailey. And they put out the most prejudicial stuff on Palestine action right at the same time. And they timed this judgment to happen on the same day as the second trial of the Filton 25 case, and 3 days after they sentenced people as terrorists. This whole thing has been orchestrated. So the real way we're going to win this is politically, is by growing the resistance against the ban. And it's by everyone standing up against this. That's how we can defeat it.
Are you surprised that this has happened? Because, of course, initially the court rules that the prescription was unlawful, but in a strange, well, it's not strange, but what subsequently happened was the Met Police wasn't going to enforce the or reverse the enforcement. So when people were still being arrested, even though the court ruled, oh, maybe it was unlawful to ban the group, the Met Police continue to basically say, we're going to continue what we're doing, and we're going to wait for the appeal. And of course, the appeal's happened, and now they've backed the government. Are you surprised that's happened?
I'm surprised at today's ruling, if I'm completely honest, mainly because when we were in the High Court, from the very beginning, I felt like we were going to win. We had a very solid case. However, just a week before our High Court judicial review, they changed the judges. And these were extremely pro-government judges, extremely biased. And so at that point, I felt like we'd lost, and it was a stitch up. And then we won. And so I think that sense gave us the sense that if we can win in front of those judges, we're going to win in front of the Court of Appeal. However, politically and realistically, that hasn't happened. And, it does follow logic in the sense that of what they did in the Filton case, of how it's been set up and stitched up from the very beginning. And that, in any struggle, it's just not It's never simple. It's never easy. You're going to go through ups and downs. But the key thing is that whenever there's repression, is that there's more resistance to it. And I believe that's what this moment is going to do. And that we are on the way to winning and defeating this ban. We just have to keep fighting and not let what they're doing, the use of terror legislation to deter us in fighting against this ban, in acting in solidarity with the Palestinian people and enacting in solidarity with the prisoners, with the Filton prisoners and others who are potentially maybe facing, a similar as the use of terror legislation against them in these prosecutions that are coming up.
Do you think this now sets a precedent for government to be able to prescribe any organisation in the UK who carry out any criminal damage?
So we were the first group to be banned on the basis, an under sole basis. I know the Court of Appeal judges tried to make it seem like it was about something else. The only basis that the government had was about serious damage to property. And there's a serious damage to property clause under the Terrorism Act. Just for a bit of context to that clause, that came mostly because of the Irish Republican Army bombing of an Arndale centre in Manchester some years before, where it cost hundreds of millions of pounds worth of damage, but no one was killed because they called in, evacuated the building beforehand. That's what their historical understanding and context is, the serious property damage clause. They're now trying to reinterpret that to mean serious property damage to mean over £1 million, basically. They haven't said that clearly, but it's quite clear from the Filton case that they've made this arbitrary decision that we're now going to say if you cause over £1 million worth of damage, it's potentially terrorism. So that's what they've been using to justify this prescription. The thing is, though, is that had never happened before. And it suddenly becomes, well, it's when you destroy, because in the Filton case, they destroyed over 40 weapons in that factory, including drones. Basically, the message is if you damage too many Israeli weapons, if you're too effective in disrupting the Israeli weapons industry, we'll call you a terrorist, and effectively use that to ban the idea of direct action under Palestine action altogether. So quite rapidly becoming that the threshold for what is terrorism is drastically potentially reducing. And, it's not even just direct action, which is being considered terrorism. It's speech that's being considered terrorism. It's the signs being considered terrorism. Even before that, people being rounded up and raided because they put something out about the resistance in Gaza. The terrorism legislation is being heavily weaponized and used against people showing solidarity with Palestine. And I believe that's just going to set the groundwork for it to be used even further.
Huda, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you.